My name is Greg Norby. I'm the general manager at the Ross Valley Sanitary District. We're really, really pleased to be here today with you guys to be able to put on this discussion with everyone. I want to thank the leaders, the officers, and Andy over all the last many months of discussions and work with the district and addressing concerns with the topic we're going to go through today. I know we're not completely finished with that dialogue yet, but it's been extremely, extremely helpful to have input and participation from the Realtors community as the district has been working to deal with the private laterals. So what we're going to go through this afternoon is I'll call it a relatively brief PowerPoint presentation. I know folks I don't want to have that go on too long. We'll leave as much time as possible for questions and answers on any aspect of this that's of interest to you guys. This is meant to be helpful for this audience. So I don't want to stand up here or have our staff stand up here and just deliver information. So please ask what's of interest to you. We may not be able to address every question and concern today. If we can't, we're going to take them with us, and we're going to be getting back to you. Let's see. A couple other quick points. The other two staff that I have with me today, and we'll all be speaking at some point or another, is Danielle McPherson, who some of you may have already met. And Danielle has for 3 or 4 years now really been the person running our lateral grant program, and also assisting a lot of other activity related to the grants, to the private laterals. And Wendy Martin Miller is our business manager, all things finance and business services with the Ross Valley Sanitary District. So that's who's here today. All the information that we go through is going to be available, or is already available, on our website. This will be recorded and available for broadcast on a couple of different sources. We'll list those websites. It will be up through the community television, YouTube site, and so forth. So those are just some things to be aware of. So I'll go through this presentation, and then we'll just open it up directly to questions and answers after that. Anything right off the bat before we get started? Okay. So first of all, the very exciting topic, Ordinance 66. Ordinance 66 is the official ordinance that was adopted by the district late last year, and it does exactly what the wording there says. It's all about the regulation for the testing, inspection, and maintenance of private sewer laterals. And in this case, it's an ordinance that's effective throughout the service area of the Ross Valley Sanitary District. So what we're going to go through today is a quick overview of the service area. I think most of you are pretty familiar with the setting. We're going to talk about really the underlying issue for a few minutes, because it's not our job to go out and make people's lives miserable and make them spend money to replace sewer laterals. It is our job to address these basic issues of the inflow and infiltration to the sewer system, and we'll talk about what that means, what some of the solutions are that we're working on, the steps we're taking to actually roll out the ordinance from a kind of a practical nuts and bolts perspective. And then, though they'll be limited as to how far we can go with some of this, but we want to spend some time talking about two of the areas we know are most challenging, and those are the common interest properties, like your condominiums and so forth, and then what we refer to as common laterals, and which are some of your older properties where you might have 2 or 3 single-family residences that, because of the way they were built and developed originally, share a common private sewer lateral. And those present some unique challenges. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll wrap up with everything we can think of to help your clients in terms of resources, information, and so forth to make the process as least disruptive as possible. When we first started our dialogue with the Realtors group, and I think it was mid last year, I forget exactly, we made a commitment to your representatives that the district, we understood the impact of the ordinance issue on property transactions, and it's our commitment to make sure that the district brings whatever resources and gives everything this process needs to make it work for everybody, including the property owners, the people involved in the business transactions and so forth. So that remains our goal and our commitment to everybody. Doesn't mean we're going to be able to solve every problem right away, but it is what we're committed to doing. This is like the beginning of the beginning. This is a very long-term process that we're starting. Upgrading a community sewer laterals is a 10 or 20 year or longer process. So again, we're just kind of at the very beginning. Okay. So the RVSD service area, you probably all mostly know where you are. You're right down here. We serve about 50,000 people. Essentially, think of the Ross Valley, and that is the service area. So your incorporated communities of Larkspur, Fairfax, San Anselmo, and then all of your unincorporated areas as well. About 20 to 25% of our service area is actually in unincorporated Marin County. So in terms of jurisdiction and so forth, I think, again, this is stuff I'm sure you folks are pretty familiar with. The district has about 200 miles of wastewater collection or sewer mains. And basically, if you look at a street grid of the Ross Valley, every one of those streets, almost without exception, represents a sewer line running in it as well to serve the properties. We have about 15,000 laterals in the system serving those properties. And based on the average lengths, that equates to about 200 miles of sewer laterals. So you can think of it, there's almost like a, not really a mirror image, that's not quite the right way to put it, but there's almost an equivalent private sewer system out there when you think about it. 200 miles of laterals and about 200 miles of public laterals, or pardon me, public sewers. So it's an immense amount of infrastructure to try and take care of, which is why I stressed a few minutes ago that this is going to be a long, sort of a long process. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. And we're also, for better or worse, one of the oldest wastewater systems in the state of California. So a lot of our neighborhoods, a lot of our buildings, a lot of the infrastructure are 75, 80, 90 years old. Some of it's newer, obviously in the 60s and 70s development, but the majority of our service area is, essentially pre-1970s and back. So a lot of this stuff has been around for 60, 70, 80 years, and that has a big impact on the condition and the reliability of the system. So what we refer to as I&I? If I use an acronym and I don't explain it, please just flag it and I'll try to do so. I&I is inflow and infiltration is the technical term. And it's just what it sounds like. You have your sewer laterals and pipes are located underground, and water, they're meant to do one thing, and one thing only. The community built a wastewater collection system to collect municipal wastewater, bring it to the treatment plant, get it treated properly so it could be disposed safely to the bay without harm to the environment or to human health, etc. That's why we're here as an agency. We're not a stormwater agency, okay? But we basically turn into a stormwater agency during rain events and so forth. And what happens is you have shallow groundwater that builds up and soaks in, and these are just video images of some of our larger pipes. And same thing on the laterals. The laterals are simply, smaller versions of the pipes. So wherever there's roots or cracks or breaks, this is the same thing that happens. And the other thing that we have quite a bit of, because of the age of the system, is what are now essentially illegal connections, but they're all over the place. We just don't have the time and resources to enforce. And that's what we call the illegal storm drain connections. And this is where a home has come along out of convenience and said, oh, I'll take the roof gutters and so on, instead of routing them to the street. Hey, there's this nice sewer lateral right next to my foundation. I'll just tie into that, and it's out of sight, out of mind. All of my rainwater and stormwater from my home's roof or my garage's roof now goes to my sewer lateral and leaves my property. I'm good with it. The problem is you've now put stormwater into a system that was designed to carry only the wastewater. And that's a very common problem. None of this is unique to Ross Valley. It's stuff that happens in communities all over the Bay Area and really across the country in the older communities. But that's the problem we're trying to solve. Because between all of this infiltration and inflow coming in, It causes huge, huge problems with our systems. And the sewer laterals, the private sewer laterals that the ordinance is addressing, industry estimates, and they're rough estimates, but our best guess is about 30% to 50% of all the I&I comes from the private sewer laterals. So if you ask how we're going to solve the I&I problem, you don't solve the I&I problem without eventually addressing the private sewer lateral problem. They really go hand in hand. So that was the intent of the ordinance. Okay, so this graph, it's the most technical thing we'll show all day, I promise. And what it is a graph from some flow monitoring we did back in February of 2014. And what you have over here is flow. And over here, these are a couple of days, February 6th, February 7th, etc. And then this is rainfall. So what happened was, rainfall event came through Marin, Kentfield, the usual places, as usual, in February. This blue line that you can see along the very bottom, that's the wastewater. That's the stuff coming out of people's homes that were actually here to convey and treat down to the CMSA plant and so forth. That's the blue line. The red line that goes from almost 1 up to around 6, that's the actual flow in the main that we had this meter installed in. And the flows went up somewhere between 30 to 50 times during the rainfall events. And that is on a widespread basis what happens throughout the system. Storm events come through, and there's a very quick response. Within an hour at the most, sometimes shorter, depending on the condition of the soils and if we've had a wet winter. The treatment plant down at CMSA, if folks know where that is, out towards San Quentin, they will see 10 to 15-fold increases in flows in a 12-hour period. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But that's the impact to the system. So essentially, we've got a wastewater system trying to act as a stormwater system in the current conditions. And we have monitoring like this all over the system that shows the same basic pattern. This is the Central Marin Sanitation Authority wastewater plant. And we are one of 3 member agencies that make up the CMSA Joint Powers Authority, okay? And we do have people come to our board meetings, and I always, it's sort of amazing, but as a public official, for part of my career now, I've learned it is true, you can never communicate too much with with the public. There have been many instances when we'll have a member of the public stand up in a board meeting when we're talking about something and say, what's CMSA? I don't know who you're talking about. Well, CMSA is the wastewater plant. They are the Joint Powers Authority that runs this. And that is where most of the city of San Rafael, the southern half of it, all of Ross Valley, and Corte Madera go to this facility. Now, what happened here in about 2005, 2006, so not too long ago, the regulatory agencies are slowly and steadily tightening the screws on the industry, I think, as most folks know. You're less and less able to do things you used to be able to do in the past. So, in the past, when this plant had high flows, their permit allowed them to just bypass the extra flow essentially into the bay. And you end up with a combination of fully treated and less fully treated wastewater going into San Francisco Bay. They've been slowly tightening up the regulations. You can't do these things overnight. So in 2006, these guys launched roughly, depending on how you count the numbers, whether you want to count debt, interest, and so forth, they spent about $70 million upgrading this plant for one reason and one reason only, so that it could handle the high spikes that come with the I&I and reduce the amount of untreated wastewater, or partially treated wastewater, that ends up getting discharged to the bay. So that's the connection with CMSA. What we're hoping to achieve over the long run with this whole program is a slow, steady reduction in that overall I&I. This is spending a tremendous amount of public money and resources to move and treat and convey water that doesn't need to be moved or treated or conveyed. This is water that ought to be going basically into a creek or into a storm drain, and we're taking it and spending tremendous amounts of money to run it through a very complicated system, and then, again, discharge it out to San Francisco Bay. So that's the connection with CMSA. For those of you, just as a side note, that operate or your business involves properties in other parts of Marin County and specifically San Rafael Sound District, Puerto Madera, and so forth, you're all aware we're sort of at different levels of starting to tackle this problem. So we're one of 3 member agencies of the Joint Powers Authority, but just as sort of a disclaimer, nothing, I'm speaking for Ross Valley Sanitary District today only. The other wastewater collection agencies are on slightly different tracks as to how they're pursuing this. So stay tuned. I mean, there will be action, as you guys can imagine. SASM and all the other agencies are slowly starting to tackle these same issues. So what are we doing? Well, the district is taking, yes, a question.
As you start to divert these stormwaters from your system into the public, the water system, that drainage system, can we assume safely that that drainage system has the capacity to deal with this additional volume that it hasn't seen, that it hasn't had to see?
We don't know the answer to that. It's a very localized situation. We have heard anecdotally, for example, where after we have come in and done, say, a major rehab project of a couple of blocks of a sewer line, the stormwater facilities in the area have seen changes, but it's such a site-specific situation. Yeah, so I couldn't tell you. Yeah, but it's something. It's sort of an interesting connection to think about. So our strategy is, you guys have heard this term before, we really are taking essentially an all of the above strategy to solving the I&I problem, because there's no one simple solution. We're investing huge amounts of money and effort in upgrading the public infrastructure in the streets, the 200 miles of sewer mains that we're responsible for. We've adopted what we think, and I think most people in the industry would agree, is a best management practices approach that really focuses on data-driven risk reduction metrics that influence where and how we invest the monies for the capital rehabilitation of the system. We're targeting about 5 miles per year of the public sewer system. That's nearly double of what the old target was. And I think in about a month from now, 2 months from now, we'll be issuing the next construction contract for this. We're on a cycle now of 1 major contract per year that covers the 5 miles of line. The work that's going on right up the street here, by the way, on Doherty, if you've noticed, that's our Magnolia trunk line, and that's a perfect example. If we showed you images of that Magnolia trunk line during storms, you'd be amazed. It's an 18-inch trunk line that ends up just completely overflowing with stormwater. It goes to a pump station right over here by the elementary school that sends it across Puerto Madera Creek. So that's, I think, somewhere in a $4 to $6 million project. We'll probably be spending about $8 million on the project that's going out in a month or so here for construction. That'll be going on every year now for the next at least 5 years until we get the most critical parts of the system into better condition. We've had a grant program since 2009. This past year, we really ramped it up. I'm really, really pleased to say, we're going to move almost $1 million worth of lateral replacement grants this year. Our prior best year, I think we had 1 year when we did like 500,000. So the district and the board have made a real commitment to this. As some of you know, if you know the history of the district, a couple years ago, we probably weren't in condition to do this. Our financials were shaky at best. We're very grateful for the community support we got in terms of getting some rate increases passed. We've just issued the second of 2 major bond issuances. We did a $30 million bond issuance a couple months ago. So we're trying to put those funds to work and get them out there and invest them in the community. Yeah.
Is there a maximum household income that you will grant to?
Currently, no. And that's something, but hold that, let's bring that back when we're done here, because we're gonna talk about some different financial incentives that we'll be bringing to the table, and that question comes up often. So, those monies are going fast. We have grants up to $4,000, or 50% of the replacement cost, whichever is less. And they are moving very, very quickly, and Danielle is the primary contact person for all things on the grant program. We had $400,000 at the beginning of our fiscal year. We thought that would be plenty, but based on past experience. We burned through that in the first quarter of the fiscal year, the new fiscal year. We did a lot of outreach. There's no one here from the city of San Anselmo, otherwise I'd make a plug. Well, I'll make a plug for them anyway. The city of San Anselmo, some of the city officials were extremely helpful. They had some major paving projects getting ready to go. And we were able to work with their staff to do outreach to all the homes in the area and identify the ones that needed replacements of the sewer laterals and got them done ahead of the paving projects coming in. And now for those of you who may not be aware, and I'm ahead of things a little bit, but it's an important point. As you know, several of the local agencies have launched major paving programs. They got the sales tax, or I think it was sales tax passed. And when they come in a lot of cases, and they do a major road work, they put the paving moratorium on that street. And in some cases, that means if you come back within less than 5 or 6 years, and you want to dig up that street for something like a sewer lateral or what have you, you're going to pay a pretty penny. They're going to ding you very, very hard to do that on purpose. They don't want people coming in to brand new streets and tearing them up. So there's a huge disincentive once, say, San Anselmo or Larkspur has finished a major new paving project. They really, really make it difficult on you if you want to come back and dig in that street. So that was sort of a pilot effort we did with San Anselmo, and it was really successful. So we can talk more about that later. But it's something that you're going to see throughout our service area because of the push for the road rehabilitation that's going on. As you all know, the roads are definitely in need of it in a lot of places. I sort of mentioned some of this already. We've really made a push in the past year to do outreach with our local government partners, Marin County Public Works, to look out at least 6 to 12 months. Where do you have paving projects? Where can we partner to get in, get sewers done, get laterals done before you come in and do your major paving project? We can't always do it, but we have been finding it to be a really successful approach. And you'll be seeing more of that in the near future. And then the Ordinance 66 is definitely a big part of this mix to start driving the upgrades to the private sewer laterals that need it. And then this last item is the newest addition, and it's, I say pending, because tomorrow evening the Ross Valley Board will be considering approval of a loan program similar to what Las Colinas Sanitary District has, and I think Richmond across the bay may have it as well. And what this is it's a program that only became possible after, I think, 2012 when there was a new state law passed. And I think Las Colinas helped spearhead it, from what I understand, to their credit. And what it does is it allows you to set up a program where the district makes a zero or low interest loan to the property owner for the replacement cost of the lateral, and then the payback on that gets attached basically to the property tax rolls. So the cash up front, impact is really reduced, and then there's a 10-year payback. Again, either some zero to low interest loan.
Where does the grant money come from?
The grant money comes from our regular, what I'll call our regular revenues, which is our sewer rate revenue and the ad valorem tax revenue, some combination of those two. The loan program money is going to come out of the bond proceeds if it's approved. We checked with all the attorneys and the bond counsel people, and they said, yes, you can do this. You can use up to X percent, I think it was 5% of the bond proceeds can be used to support a program like this. So I mentioned a few minutes ago, we closed a $30 million bond deal, November.
beginning of it?
So that's where the $1.5 million is coming from to sort of seed the loan program. And we don't know that that's pending, but if you're interested and it's something you'd be supportive of, we'd welcome you to show up at tomorrow evening's board meeting. It'll be kind of the latest addition to the program. Yeah.
Is there any possibility perhaps combining on an individual basis a grant plus a loan, or are they going to be mutually exclusive?
Not yet, and we're not sure. We're wrestling with some of those questions because to your, like as the gentleman up front alluded, as we put both of these on the table, assuming that the loan program gets approved, we probably want to give some thought as to how best to leverage those. So, for example, if it's a grant, do you want to make that available for a targeted portion of the homeowner population? These are just ideas, to be crystal clear. My board has not discussed how to merge those two, but we are definitely talking about it because there's a role for both. Interestingly, in other communities, they're all over the map in terms of the response. TAM-CSD, I think, has both. They have a grant and a loan, and they get a real mix on who picks what. I think some people consider maybe the loan more of a hassle. I mean, that's being a little flippant, but I don't know why people choose. We're thinking that between the loan program, the grant program, and some of the other incentives we can come up with, like helping out with subsidizing inspections or whatever it might be, we're gonna be able to drive a lot more traffic than the other districts have recently, just because the need is. I'm expecting the need to be there as a general manager. Otherwise, we wouldn't be, making the recommendation to set aside, the $1.5 million to fund the program. And eventually, the idea is that the loan program, of course, becomes self-sustaining as you receive the payback revenue streams. You're then funding the new ones. And $1.5 million, again, it sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but at say $6,000 to $10,000 per lateral, and if you're doing 300, 400, 500, 600 laterals a year collectively, suddenly those numbers grow pretty quickly, and you can see that doesn't get you all the way. Yeah.
I had a sewer lateral bid in Marin City, and it was in a condominium kind of townhouse, row house.
Yeah.
I don't think it was more than 25 feet or so from the middle of the road, to the property. The estimate was $6,500 for that.
Yeah.
And my other experience a number of years ago, like 12 or so years ago, was an $18,000 bid for a sewer lateral. And so,
Yeah,
and that was
those are-
12 or 13 years
But
ago.
it depends on the
Those
depth.
are-
No, but
It
that
depends on the
was
depth a lot of it.
Yeah.
That's when they have.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very different, I would assume, because the one good thing we have going for us at this point, and we'll share some of this with you guys later, is we're developing a tremendous amount of, we track all of our grant program information very carefully in a database. So we have that basically length, location, final bid cost, et cetera, by community. So, and it does change by community. So for example, some of your properties in Ross tend to be the larger parcels, longer laterals, they stand out. And if you look at other communities, the averages are lower. So we'll share some of that with you in a moment. The cost trends are something, and this is strictly myself as just speaking as a professional in the industry. The cost trends are going to be dynamic because this is an unfolding regional and statewide trend. So as you look at the trades and all the other stakeholders involved in this, there's a lot of technology, a lot of new technology being brought to bear on these problems, how to do it with trenchless methods. So it's a rapidly changing picture in terms of what the trades industry and the plumbing industry and so forth is bringing to this. So yeah.
Have you, I'm sorry I was
No.
late, but have you addressed the question of how long intersecting laterals that cross over neighboring properties are going to be handled?
Yeah, we're
And
gonna.
how we are as agents to advise our seller, potential home
Yeah.
sellers that come to us with a need to sell, not just, oh gee, it would be nice
Yeah.
to sell while the market's hot.
Yeah.
They may be aging out of their jobs,
Right.
suffering from health concerns,
Right.
having disability, needing to go to rest homes or
Okay.
to their maker.
Yes.
And so we deal with all of these situations with family members that are in urgent situations at times.
Right.
They're not all recreational sellers. And all of a sudden, they're going to be faced with the potential of having to negotiate with one or more neighbors over access agreements and
Right.
easements that may not exist. So have you given much thought to that?
It's almost the only thing on this whole program we talked about anymore in the last couple of weeks. I'll get to that, yeah, because it's clearly, even though it's a relatively small number of properties in the whole community, when it happens, it has a very disproportionate set of challenges because of all those dynamics. So this is these are the really basic requirements of the ordinance. Okay. So if you look over here, this is what we use the term trigger. It's the criteria that requires something to happen. So under a property sale, where you're actually selling the property, money's changing hands, or what we call the remodel trigger, which has actually been around for a while. That goes back a ways. The only thing we did was change the dollar amount. But if you're doing a remodel greater than $75,000 or the addition of a bathroom, you need to complete. The bottom line is you need to complete a successful pressure test, which shows the integrity of the lateral is it's in good shape, and it's not going to have excessive INI. So that's the whole purpose of the pressure test. If any of these things happen, this is a little bit outside of your, I think this audience's focus, but we deal with a whole bunch of private sewer situations. People call us and say, out in front of my business, the sidewalk, there's water bubbling up, apartments, etc. So basically, if your sewer lateral is not being maintained properly, and you're either creating a public health and safety risk, or other problems, those are regulatory triggers where we can come into a property, essentially issue a letter, and it's like a citation basically. We do them very infrequently, but they are on the books, and the idea is if we see an obvious problem with someone who's really being negligent in terms of maintaining their sewer, their lateral, we do have the authority to come in and request the inspection, and then based on the inspection, require remedial action. And this, it's not strictly a private property issue, because what happens, and I can cite a lot of anecdotal examples, is if you have a very poor condition lateral that's dumping soil, rocks, roots, etc. into the main sewer, then what that happens is that ends up coming downstream, and at some point creating a situation that has escalated risk of a sanitary sewer overflow, like out in the middle of the street. So that's what these basic enforcement mechanisms are under the ordinance.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Do
absolutely.
clay pipes withstand a pressure test?
Clay pipes withstand a pressure test.
I mean, what happens if
They
sewer?
certainly can if they
They
are
can.
properly installed and gasketed. I mean, modern vitrified clay pipe is
What if
used in
it's an
places.
older house and they're older?
I'm going to say
No.
generally the people
Probably
who
not.
do the work in the field say no. It's very unlikely. The old pipes, they didn't, a lot of them had just very poor joint connections. You guys know that our territory, we have a lot of settlement, we have a lot of steep hillsides. These are your typical vitrified clay pipe is like a 4-foot segment, 5-foot segment. They just don't, in a perfect situation, they last a long time, but in our service conditions here, they really tend to have a lot of problems over time, especially if they're 50 or 60
So
years
you
old.
have automatically, if you have a clay pipe, if you do a sewer lateral test,
Mhm.
automatically you're going to need a pressure.
If you were to find that you had a property, I'm just making up numbers here to be clear, anecdotally. If you had a property that was, say, 50 or 60 years old, and you knew first of all, we'll talk a little bit more about this, we always recommend call the district, because we have a record. They're not always perfect, there's some old records, but we can at least let you know what we have on file for that property, to give you what we know. And if it says that, hey, it's 60 years old, we have no record of permitted work, it indicates it's clay, I'm going to hesitate to give advice today because every situation is very different, but there's probably a reasonable course of action to say, why don't I just start with my lowest cost step, which is to do a video inspection, and see what I find. The video inspection is going to be very informative typically at a relatively modest cost these days. And from there, you can then make better decisions along with your client as to what, based on what you see.
With the
Yeah.
help of contractor too.
Yes, I'm always with the, we do this, we say this always. We maintain a list of qualified contractors. We always encourage you to make sure you're working with, obviously, a properly licensed qualified contractor for any of this. I'm not sure, I'm just gonna work from left to right, or right to left, go ahead.
So if you do that and you replace the sewer lateral with a client and then, so they have a full replacement, then obviously do you have to then get a pressure test for you guys as well?
Yeah, the pressure test is the final inspection step, so they'll come in, let's say you go that route, because your contractor inspects it, determines it's in bad shape, he recommends replacing it. When you get a permit for the replacement work, and they follow the district standards for construction and installation, you're then gonna come back as a final quality control step and conduct the pressure test on the lateral to make sure that it's, that it's sound.
So does the seller have to pay for that pressure test in addition to the replacement?
That's negotiable between the private parties.
The pressure test is already part of a normal final inspection
Right,
process, so
but
that's
it's not
nothing new.
something about-
Yeah.
okay.
But it's an outside, it's a third party who does it.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
it's
the
not-
it's the contractor that does it, yes.
Yeah.
So the property transfer that was other than a sale, can you go back to that and
Yeah,
tell us what that is?
thanks, I kind of went, I went over that a little bit too quickly.
The property
If
transfer.
it's a transfer, it's say between family members or a deed transfer, what have you, then basically the inspection, just the CCTV inspection is required. That will get reviewed by the district and the district engineer, and if we see, clear need for remediation or repair, we'll make that recommendation back to
So
you.
just a deed transfer between husband and wife and a divorce.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I mean, the nuances of the property transfer types. I'm gonna, to be on the safe side, I'm gonna say that if the title is going from names A and B to only name A or name C, then yes, you probably are subject to this, but I hesitate to say that with
You might want to let the attorneys know that do
Yeah.
divorce cases.
Okay, no,
Somebody's
yeah.
gonna end up having to pay for that,
Um,
and that's gonna be an unknown
I just
when
want to
things
keep a
get
list of
negotiated.
things like that. Yeah, okay, that's a very, I don't want to give an answer I can't really substantiate, so. Okay. Yeah,
If you put your property in a trust and then you want to refinance it, take out the trust and then you refinance and then you put it back in the trust. So, it's going from you to you to you.
yeah.
In some instances, you're a trustee, some instances you're not. So that comes to my mind as an issue. But also, the pressure test is a higher standard than the pipe spy kind of video, right? So.
Well, they're two separate tools. They're part of a package of tools you use to evaluate your lateral.
So if you have a situation where you know it is a clay pipe, if you know it is at least 50 years old, you can probably presume that, I've heard that no clay pipes pass a pressure test.
I don't know that. I couldn't tell you that.
Statistically, do you have any idea how many fail? Isn't that percentage huge?
I don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, then do you get a permit from your organization and from the entity where you live to accomplish this task of redoing the sewer lateral?
So let's see. So if it's a property within the Ross Valley Sanitary District, if you're working on the sewer lateral, you're going to want to get a permit from the district.
And how much is that?
250. And I would urge you, because I'm a general manager, I don't always work as closely to the process as some of the staff. But typically, if you're working in the street, you're going to need an encroachment permit as well from whoever owns the street. So always check with your local building official, whoever has jurisdiction over the street.
And you need a building permit as well?
I
Through
don't-
the towns or the counties?
No, your contractor will have that. The contractor does it. The plumbers get those permits.
Yeah, I think most of them are pretty good about they know the
It's
drill.
incorporated in their fee.
One of the job costs when they quote it.
Yeah, I want to keep working this way.
And
just
how
like
will it
that.
be enforced?
How?
Who
Will it
is
be
going
enforced?
to enforce it?
Okay, good question. So what we're relying on is, well, let's just take, there's different aspects of enforcement. So traditionally, on, for example, the remodeling, that's been around for a number of years. It's got a pretty well-established process. See, because you pull a building permit for, let's say you're going to do a demo rebuild. You pull that from your local building official department in that jurisdiction. In their permit, they have ties to other discretionary permits, such as ones from the sanitary district, from the water district, and so on. And so that permit becomes sort of the catch, because it can't be closed until the other related permits have been signed off on. So that has a fairly established and I think relatively effective process. For the newer ones, we basically are going to be relying on public awareness of the requirement and responsibility for compliance, just as you would for anything else that applies to the property transaction. We recognize that a key to that is awareness. There is, what we'll be planning on doing is a periodic check. We're actually, Wendy's working on this right now. We're letting a contract here in the next, hopefully next couple of weeks, purchase order. Don't worry, sorry. This is the access. We're getting an update to basically an access database tool to help
like
us
the tax
track.
records?
Well, to track the status of the permits, because what happens is once you pull the district permit, that becomes our tracking tool. And what we do is we'll review those periodically and go, okay, well, this one never got closed out, for example. There is a 60-day allowance for completing compliance, if that's a detail, but it's an important one. We added it after discussions with this group. So you have up to 60 days after the close of escrow to complete the process. We were hoping that would be,
Yes, but I also have another thing I'm working on for being able to follow up.
Okay.
So
You want to mention it, or is it?
I'm working with the county to be able to see the filing of those property sale transfers, the transfer of title due to a property sale, and narrow that down to our service area. And we would then go ahead and be checking it against our permit database to make sure that it's either been completed and a certificate of compliance issued, or that it has at least been permitted and is underway.
Yeah, and we've tried, we debated or discussed internally putting more sort of enforcement mechanisms into all of this, and we purposely chose not to. There are other agencies that, for example, when you open up this process, someone puts like a $5,000 deposit down, and that deposit only gets back, you only get it back after the final piece of paperwork is in. We purposely chose to not go that route, and we didn't want to solve a problem until we had one. And so we're really going to be relying on public awareness and some basic database queries and checks, like on a quarterly basis, what have you. Enforcement, just as a general comment from the district's perspective, it's always the last place we always want to go. It's a huge time sink. You guys, I'm sure, know this from all the agencies you deal with. We will bend over backwards to try to avoid enforcement. Not because it's not important, but because if we can find a solution that avoids going to enforcement, we almost always want to do that. It saves us time. It saves a lot of everybody's, emotional energy and hassle. So enforcement is not the first thing you're going to see this district go to. So, yeah.
We're familiar with the required video testing that we do, like in Belvedere and Sausalito.
Yeah, okay.
The pressure test is a new layer for us. Are there other communities? What did you model this after?
Fair amount of it's modeled after what's going with the East Bay Mud program that covers all of their satellite agencies. We are aware that within Marin County, I think at the moment we may be the only wastewater utility requiring the pressure test versus just the inspections. I haven't discussed in great detail, some of how they're implementing this, for example, in the SASM agencies in Mill Valley and so forth. Anecdotally, I understand we're the only one doing it in Marin County. Industry-wide, the pressure test is just a good standard final quality control check. So from that sense, I guess to really answer your question, we're modeling it largely after the communities in the East Bay that have been doing this.
Do you have an approximate cost on a pressure test?
Pressure test cost?
What's it cost?
I heard about between $600 and $850.
How much?
$680.
Yeah.
So say $600 to $1,000. Those are anecdotal.
Again, it's built into the job cost.
Let me see if I can get, there's just a couple more of these and we'll go on the questions and answers. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, obviously we're interested in transfer title here.
Yeah.
And so let's say that the house that you're gonna be putting on the market, the sewer lateral crosses into one or two neighbors' properties, okay? And there's no, so you knock on the neighbor's door and you say, guess what?
Here's a fresh big.
But I have, let's say, they say, well, I have a $50,000
Driveway.
I have a $50,000 garden, and there's no way you're going to tear up my garden or my driveway or whatever. Then what do you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna get to that. Just maybe one, yeah, I mean, not to be, it's a significant issue and we don't have answers to all of that. Okay, dates of implementation. This is basically where we are in terms of rollout. Obviously, this is what the ordinance does, as we already talked about. It applies to every property within our service area. There are no exceptions. The initial implementation was back in July of 2014. We carved out an exception at that time or subsequently for the property sales. So the other triggers have actually been in place. So we've been handling permits and so on already that have come up through this. But January 1st of this year was when it became effective for property sales. We covered some of this a moment ago, exceptions. Or actually, no, we didn't. Apologize. If there is reasonable documentation, typically for us, that's the permit from the district that the lateral was installed and built properly, and it's less than 20 years old, then the testing is not required. And same thing, if what you're subject to or the property subject to is the inspection, if there's documentation within the last 3 years, then there's no need to redo that. And those are things we'll typically rely on, the documents that have been pulled from the district, which is the permit to do the work. And then I kind of already touched on this, but I did want to also re-emphasize the district. We truly are committed to working with the community, and I know there's a lot of different stakeholders in this process to find a way to make this work. We know it's a big change. We know it presents a lot of special challenges in certain situations. We are going to keep working with people to figure out how to make this happen. Yeah.
If the goal is to reduce the storm water that from the massive storms, and then this massive amount of storm water goes into your system when it shouldn't, how does that relate to replacing pipes?
Say that
the pipes that are going to, the replacement pipes that are going to be put in
right.
due to this.
Right.
How does that relate to reducing the massive influx of storm water?
Sure. Well, very directly, because again, about somewhere between a third to a half of all the I&I that's coming into the public system is coming from the private laterals. So, when you take a 100-foot lateral that's riddled with roots and holes, etc., and you replace it with a new one in solid condition, you're going to have eliminated, and maybe you find a couple old storm roof drain connections in there because it's an old property and you eliminate those. You've basically now eliminated all the I&I from that property. That's what we're looking for.
So when you come out for that replacement and repair, you're actually going to be looking for the roof drains and things like that, because that actually seems to be a much greater amount of water that's dumped.
It can be the video. That's partly the objective of the video inspection is, because normally, unless you have a cottage or a in-law unit, they should start at one end. Typically they'll start at your foundation or where you have a clean out. They should be going all the way to the street, and they shouldn't see any side laterals coming in. If the inspector or the person conducting it sees it, if they're doing their job right, they're going to flag that for you and say, hey, it looks like you've got a drain coming in over here from the left. and there's nothing over there, you know, except your, you know, your lawn and maybe you can, there are ways to test for that. You can do some, well,
Because our camera guys can't test for that, because a lot of times they
Yeah.
think they're abandoned, because they don't know where they're coming from.
Yeah.
When they do
that's-
the lateral replacement, all those side connections, they have to know where there's any connection when they do the replacement because they need to dig and reinstall that connection. If your neighbor is connected and they pull through that and don't reconnect them, they're gonna start flushing their toilet into their basement. So they have to go and they have to reconnect any connection, and they have to identify where those connections are coming from. So if it's a roof leader or an area drain, they're going to do the pipe bursting right through that, and they're not gonna reconnect it. They have to
But you
rerun
guys
it.
are gonna have to educate them and the contractors that that's illegal or whatever it is,
The
because
contractors
otherwise they're
already
just
know.
gonna do it again.
yeah.
No, they
No,
know.
there should not be any, I mean, the roof drain connections have been, you know, those have been illegal for a very, very long time, but they've been one of those things that people, you know, do out of convenience. But yeah, so there's also something called smoke testing that you can do. It's just what it sounds like. You're using a non-toxic smoke generation. You basically send that up the lateral, and if there's a roof connection, you know, guess what you see is suddenly your gutters start showing a gray smoke coming out. So there are ways to kind of trace these down. Okay, this is to shift gears to the common interest, what we call the common interest properties. Now that's what we're referring to. That's basically your condominium complexes, maybe some of your larger commercial developments. The ordinance language currently is very simple and minimal on this. It says, you know, essentially this is a private property, private lateral issue. You collectively are responsible for compliance with this. It does not go into a lot of detail. We recognize that in some situations that may be relatively easy to fix. We say, hey, the HOA is really on top of it. Everyone agrees they want to get this taken care of so all the future transactions don't get hung up. But this is new territory for everybody. What we recommend, and we've already got one of these, I think, that is in progress, is call the district. Right, you know, get us involved. We can come out, we can meet with representatives, the property owner, the parcel owner, or the unit owner, the HOA, and at least explore and talk about how best to address the particular property and what options are for bringing it into compliance. Again, looking to our neighbors who have, in some cases, 4 or 5 more years dealing with this, meaning across the bay. They have been developing some successful approaches that essentially kind of carve out a way to let like a large condominium complex develop a plan, sign off with the district, so to speak, you know, the HOA, so there's somebody legally responsible. And then basically, as long as that plan is being adhered to, then all of the affected properties are essentially, you know, under that umbrella. And I want to stress, we don't have that yet. We're in discussions about it. We're hearing good things about it. And our best information for you all today is if you have a condominium transaction and this is applying, give us a call and we'll get involved as early as we can and try and assist in any way we can. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, you want to go?
Okay, I'll go. Are you doing public outreach directly to HOAs? Because every HOA is different, and
Right.
they don't know that this is serious.
We're just starting. Our rough goal is, and it's just that, was to basically, from our records, which are not as good as others in some ways, was to basically start with something like essentially the top 10, the largest by unit count HOAs in the community, in our service area, and essentially just go proactively call them and start talking to them about how we might want to tackle this for them. We know we need to move on this, and we're going to be moving on it. And so we'll be bringing some solutions to the board, like in the next, probably 2 board cycles. We need to spend a little more time talking with our folks across the bay to learn how what's been working for them. And then also, like I said, we have 1 or 2 active cases, and we'd like to just walk the properties, talk about the lateral layout, and say how, what's the best way to fix this. We do have financial assistance as well to the HOAs, just like for the single family properties.
On the couple of slides back, you mentioned that properties 20 years or less.
Yeah.
Is that a sort of a line in the sand that you can say any properties that were built after a certain year will be exempt, or is it going to be on a case by case basis?
Well, it's a 20 years just relative to that property. So that property may have been built 50 years ago, but if 10 years ago, because they were having a bunch of sewer lateral problems, they may have come in on their own, or 4 years ago they did the grant program.
Okay, but let's just say any property that was built 19 years ago
I
and
see what you're
newer,
saying.
is there going to be an easy?
You should be able, if it's 19 years or newer, you should be able to call the district. Go ahead, Danielle, you know this.
As long as they got a permit for the installation of the sewer.
Yeah.
As long as everything's permitted, it doesn't matter, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see, let me go from there to there. Okay, behind, sir.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I lost my thought. You were talking about something else just before the last question.
The HOA.
Oh, the HOAs. If we're going to list a condo in Fairfax or Spyglass or Larkspur Isle or wherever, can we call a district and find out the formation of the sewer laterals, if they're shared or not?
Do we have that record?
No, in most cases, we do not have records of what the laterals look like. So that would be something that the HOA should have. Because if in the CCNRs they say that they're responsible for the laterals, they should have the plans from when those laterals were constructed.
So then are you saying that if the HOA is responsible for the laterals, which they almost always are, the deals I can think of, we're not really, it's not applicable right now, is that correct?
Oh, no, it's applicable. They're under the ordinance right now. If we did nothing else from today on, your best course of action is for the HOA to say, okay, we have a common interest in solving this problem, so our property is not, our owners are not hung up by this. We either can show that our laterals are in compliance. If they're not, as an HOA, we undertake the steps to go ahead and get them into compliance, which means, doing the inspection.
So one sale will trigger their whole deal.
Yeah, correct.
But what happens to that one sale?
But the deal is when we go to list a condo now, right now, and the HOA doesn't have a clue about this, it's going to be a nightmare. We will not be able to close in 30 days and then get it done in another 6
Yeah,
weeks.
they may not even have a
HOAs
board meeting in 30 days.
HOAs meet some of
And
them not very often at all.
frequently.
So it would really help us dramatically if you guys could get the name of every HOA that would be in this jurisdiction and write them letters and give them a heads up that this is happening and that they should contact you.
Do you as a realtor know how you find out who the HOAs are? Because that's the problem we have.
Go to the management companies.
That's easy.
But there's also,
I don't know the management company side, but this is not our business. So that's what that
I could say
No, so could we ask, I'm gonna kind of ask this to Andy. Where did Andy go?
Andy, go.
Okay, no worries. So now I'll ask you, I mean, if we can follow up with you, what we'd really like to know, because we did have this conversation just a week ago. And I'm very familiar with condominium situation. My old district, half the housing stock in the entire city was because it was a resort community, it was all condominiums. If you can give us some ideas about accessible data sources or information to just help us go, okay, here's the top 10, or here's a list of all the HOAs in these communities, we're more than happy to initiate that outreach, but seriously, it's not the thing we know how to do
I
best.
believe there's a list online of HOA associations.
Oh, even better.
Yeah, that's great. If you have
where everything else is these days.
something I could Google
That needs to
would
be
be
handled
great.
in advance, because
Okay.
it's going to be a nightmare.
Okay, so we've got that on our very next to-do list for this whole effort, meaning the outreach to the condo HOAs, because we see a lot of benefit there. If we can hit some of the big complexes and we can work out some approaches, take those back to our board, get them signed off on, then we can hopefully set a model or a precedent that you guys could, or collectively we could take to other complexes.
But I think a letter needs to go out to even little ones.
Yeah, but how do you then
hold an individual person responsible for something that's not figured out on the scale yet. I mean, this is some people's whole asset is their condo that they're selling. And to snag them up and make their condo unsaleable, they may need to sell it for some particular reason. It's pretty outrageous that would be your rule, like, oh, well, we'll just have to see what happens, because that's really not okay with these people.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I completely understand the concern. I mean, we'll try to figure out a way to remove that, in a sense, get an entire complex cleared, and it's, the quickest way that we can figure out.
And that's what they're doing in the East Bay, the clear complex?
Well, no, from what I understand, what they're doing is they've developed an approach that lets the HOA and the local agency, they come up with an agreed upon plan that says, okay, over the next, I don't know, I want to say it's like 2 years or something.
10.
Okay, they give them a certain amount of time to basically go through and upgrade the whole complex. And there, of course, I'm not familiar with the details of the arrangements, but basically it lets the district know that the problem's being taken care of, and it then removes this issue from the individual unit owners that are trying to buy and sell the properties.
But for an HOA to do that and to accomplish that plan will take so much time. So the deal is, I think that either you guys should allow a whole lot more time, like a year to replace the lateral, or something like that. Condos should be an exception to that, different than a single family residence.
Because it's 10 to 20 years.
It's clearly different.
Well, you can't even get a call back. It has to be
They just don't, they don't.
And then the new buyers.
At this time,
And that's the next one, okay.
Figure that out.
So.
Just to comment
Oh,
on
yeah.
I think Connie's comment is very valid. I mean, I think as a group, we are very much, having been longtime residents in Marin, very interested in protecting the environment and solving this problem and helping you as the front line on this.
Yeah.
Actually, you're the front line, or second line in how to solve this with our property owners. So it's not about, resistance to the concept. It's how to implement it. And with a condominium complex, it's likely they're gonna have to levy special assessments to deal with this. And so that could take time to agree upon. But what we don't wanna have happen is our condo owners, like in a need to sell situation, unable to transact as a result of a onerous special assessment or not. So there should be some consideration to amortization of the cost as well, definitely.
Okay, very good. Amortization of the overall cost for upgrading the complex, is that what you mean?
Or the sewer lateral.
Yeah, that's okay.
Within the complex.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I had experience in Marin City a few years ago, which they call Sausalito Sanitary District. And the complex consisted not only of townhomes, but it also consisted of some more apartment structures in the same complex. So you had individual sewer laterals for the townhomes, and then you had a joint arrangement with the apartment. And that is happening, that has happened here, I believe, in some other townhome or condominium complexes. I can think of one in Corte Madera that has that apartment style and more the individual thing.
Are they on separate parcels, or are they?
Yeah, they all have their own parcel, but the townhomes had their own lateral and the other ones didn't. So I happened to be working on two that had townhomes, and they had just implemented, it was Ordinance 89 there. And they had not even dealt with it at all. The sanitary district had no idea how to do it. In both of those instances, they were short sales. And they said, well, the seller's going to pay for it. I said, no, the seller's not going to pay for anything. They have no money. I'm dealing with 2 or 3 banks in some instances,
Did that find a way?
I was able to close the escrows.
Okay.
One of them cost $6,500. They held up the buyer for $6,500 for this, a lateral replacement. In the other one, there had been a repair done in the last year and a half or something like that. I think it was Roto-Rooter or something, but somehow that was approved and there was no cost for that second transfer situation.
Okay.
So,
I have a suggestion. Instead of making the condos point of sale, if you guys could contact every complex and just tell them, they're all older. I mean, there's no new ones except for a few. So just tell them you're going to have to replace your laterals. I mean, a pressure test is probably gonna, I don't know what it would do to some of these
Well, and in all seriousness, you know, if you are, I think from a practical perspective, if you are going to tackle a complex, you want to do it in one push, you know. So if we, one thing we would look at is, can we, you know, we've carved out financial incentives of various types at the moment that are quite broad. You know, we have the grants and the loans, and they don't really distinguish beyond that, whether it's a commercial property or a single family or a condominium type. So that's an area we're looking at, because for both the common interest properties, and I'm just going to throw this up because it's the next to the last one, the common laterals, they do have these unique challenges. So in addition to looking at some solutions and some ways that people have been solving these problems, we are interested in saying, okay, there might be situations where it makes sense to provide a specific type of financial incentive to like a large condo complex to get in and tackle the whole problem. It helps us too, to have that whole chunk of the service area taken care of. So, okay.
Just two quick questions. For properties that we got in contract in December and are closing in like next week.
Right.
Where does that leave us, number one? And number two is, when are we gonna, is this gonna be in the Marin County disclosures, or when are we gonna see this as a part of our disclosures to our?
Okay, well, the first part is if they went into if they open escrow on January 1st or after, then they're subject to the ordinance. If they're already in before that, they're not. And as far as the disclosures and so on, I'm gonna ask, we looked at some sample forms that have been worked out, but are they?
We should have that dealt with by the middle of
Okay, so I know that there was some fairly well regarded standard disclosure and agreement forms or templates that have been being used in a lot of these state communities because of how long this has been rolled out there. So I think people have been trying to model off of those, but I don't know I can comment much more than that.
And it can be negotiated 60 days after. That can be negotiated in the contract as to if that's paid for by the buyer.
Yeah, who pays for it is up to the parties. The 60-day just means that by the 60 days after the close of escrow is when the permit needs to be closed out, which means there would have been a successful pressure test and the whole process is closed out. So, okay.
I think what Connie is suggesting is what everybody in the room is suggesting is that perhaps the program was rolled out for everything except single-family homes in January of 2015, back in July of 2014, and that because the condominium sales are so, it's going to be so complicated, and if you just take Greenbrae, for example, and all the condominiums that are for sale there, and we're not talking Spyglass, even older than that, all those condos that are going to be coming up for sale, they're for sale now, they're going to be coming up. Those places are old and huge, and it could take 6 months to get some form of an agreement. So perhaps this implementation for the condominiums could be postponed until this notification has gone out that it is going to be coming up.
We are open to all these suggestions. I want to be clear. I hope our record so far working with you guys has demonstrated that. I know that, you know, when I was advising as general manager to the board, we had heard from other agencies that, look, you're probably not going to get this right out of the gate. You're going to roll it out and you're going to run into real world problems because there's so many complexities, there's so many special situations. And that was the practical advice that we heard, again, from some of the agencies in the East Bay. So we have had the expectation, and I've tried to maintain that with staff and with our board, that this isn't set in stone. We're trying to solve a problem. We're not trying to do something for the sake of doing it. So all of these suggestions so far, I consider all of them constructive, stuff that we'll follow up on.
If I list a condo tomorrow, right now, okay, we're subject to all this stuff. So I think we need some resolution on this very quickly.
Yeah, there's a bunch of
So I can't promise anything except that we'll bring the recommendations back to our board. I would say within 1 to 2 board cycles. We meet once a month. That takes us into roughly February.
Sounds like an HOA. On this, I swear to God, it's going to be impossible possible to list a condo and get, and have this
Close it.
happen?
Connie,
and-
keep in mind
And
he's
have those people be able to sell their condo?
He just finished saying that
Possible.
enforcement is not what they're doing, though,
Yeah.
right? So while we're figuring it out,
I think right now.
Let's stop it.
You will, I don't want to be, ambiguous. I mean, to be clear, if you start the process, what's on the books today is on the books. You are at,
Greg, if I might
yeah, go ahead.
share what I have been sharing with those realtors and condo owners who have called the district, is first things first, if you don't know how the HOA handles sewer laterals, if you don't have the CCNRs ready, find that out and contact the HOA and give us the contact information, and let's bring us all to the table. Let people know that you can put it on the market. There is at minimum the 60 days that we allow. And then let us work from there. We are not interested in stopping sales. So just bring us to the table is what we're asking right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't go, well, I don't want to advise you guys to stop. Okay, so,
I think probably what you're looking for from us are suggestions, and I think the one
Yeah.
that Connie made, it seems like the two real speed bumps are the condos and shared laterals.
yes.
And maybe what you guys could do is just simply create exceptions for those two situations, because if it's a situation where it's just like one lateral in a single family home, this isn't gonna be a gut wrencher. But in those situations that are coming up, it will be real
Yeah.
gut wrenchers, and that would seem like it could be a
Yeah.
pretty
And we have one of these
simple
right
solution.
now already, and it's a short sale, and I can't go into detail, obviously it's a private transaction, but it's making the whole situation, it's illustrating very well a lot of these. It's a classic situation with the lowest property, I think one or two properties above it, they come down, the common lateral goes through this last property's, it's on that person's property. They're saying, we've done everything, ours is in good shape, our friends up the hill, that we may or may not get along with very well, it's not clear that they can find a mutual solution. Because the way this is written now, and let me give you guys a little bit of background real quick. Now we're shifting to the common lateral, so from HOAs and condos. Common laterals were initially made illegal way back in the 1950s in Ross Valley. There was a major overhaul to the district ordinances and construction standards and so on. It's like late 50s, early 60s. And that's when the official, you can't do these was put on the books. We know that there are a fair number of them, but we think that they represent certainly a relatively small overall percentage of all the properties. So we want to find a solution that doesn't hold up the whole, program while we figure these out. But that's one thing to keep in mind. Do you know roughly the age of the property? Do you know the layout? And what's the problem? Who cares? Well, the problem is, and we see this on a regular basis, and people try to drag us into it as a public agency. I say that, maybe too loosely, but we resist getting involved. The shared laterals, 9 times out of 10 from what we see, no one bothered to record easements, and no one bothered to record agreements about who's responsible for maintenance and replacement and repair. So two, three homeowners have been happily ignoring this problem for 50 or 60 years until it can't be ignored anymore. And the reality is that those 2 or 3 property owners chose to share that piece of private property. It is their responsibility. I mean, let's not try to sugarcoat it. They share that lateral for a very important purpose, for wastewater service. When a problem arises, we get calls. I've been out. My so-and-so neighbor up the hill, he did this, this, and this, and, I want to just dig down and block, put a chunk of concrete in the sewer lateral right now. Don't advise doing that, but you guys know, it's neighbors, it's personal, and they didn't, I've yet to run into one, maybe you guys have, that had an easement recorded and or an agreement. So these have been a problem waiting to come to the surface. They just have never had to deal with them yet. What from our perspective, we don't have a way to enforce if there's a legitimate public health hazard. We have no choice but to say, look, all three of you properties share this. It is whether you like it or not. It's what you chose to do when you bought this property. It's like a shared driveway or other, examples I guess you could use. So that's our concern. That's why we care about these, because they're often in very bad shape, and the neighbors have never bothered to figure out how to take care of them. And as several of you have pointed out already, the neighbor down the road decides to put a $100,000 patio on top of the sewer lateral without telling his friend up the street. I mean, we've seen everything. I think we even got one that goes through a person's house.
I just saw one where it goes under the house.
The lower house.
But
These are interesting.
couldn't that sewer lateral just be replaced with a new trenchless one that works?
Okay, so here's, what we've talked a lot about this. We have run into these in the past before the ordinance was on the books, because sometimes these were triggered because of the demo rebuilds. We generally recommend or suggest, the first thing is if a property can viably re-sewer and basically get off of the shared lateral, that's what we would generally consider the best solution. And because sometimes, the way the street was initially developed, it wasn't practical, but now there's a way they could if they wanted to. So preference number one is have any property that can feasibly replumb, staying on their own property, go ahead and do that. That's kind of number one. Second one is, hey, we do get along. If you can do a trenchless replacement and put it in parallel and fix it, we're all going to get along and be okay. There's an easement. Maybe there's two 4-inch pipes in the easement, and the neighbors agree that it's all okay. And we have had these. They have worked it out. In fact, most of them do work it out. The third one, really, well, at the moment, those are the only two. You either separate off on your own property, or you find a way to stay within the same alignment, and you agree to have a contractor come in and split you out and put you on separate laterals. This is the catch-all, kind of like the condo discussion. We're evaluating a couple of new options for the common laterals, but they're going to take a couple of months to get to the board and get approval or get consideration.
Because I mentioned trenchless, is that an acceptable fix for
Well,
lateral?
it's a construction method that just minimizes the disruption is all. So if
Will they pass a pressure test if you do trenchless?
Oh yeah, if it's done correctly, yeah. We do as much work as possible trenchless these days, yeah.
Can I ask you a question? You have a common, let's say you have a property where a neighbor is tying into your lateral. You're selling your house, your neighbor isn't. You are now requiring them to go ahead and take care of something that they wouldn't need to take care of until they would go to sell. Because now they're going to have to do their lateral as well.
Correct.
No, so how do you get
You
your
don't think
neighbor
that's
to
gonna be a big problem?
That's not, I think we're
Go ahead.
misunderstanding that. You're saying property A is selling and property B at some point tied into their lateral.
Yeah.
We're not requiring property B does anything, we're only requiring that property A does something, and either you
A block of concrete?
disconnect completely and you sewer in a different way, or you replace up to the common section, and then you separate for the non-common section.
Yeah, but that's
So
their
wait,
pipe.
if they're
Yeah, but they're
tying
leaving
your
the old one.
pipe,
But how,
and you
unless
just cut
you
them
have-
off, where are
that's
they
the problem
going?
with no easements and
You're
no
cutting
maintenance
yourself
agreements,
off.
because you don't know necessarily whose pipe it was first and who tied into who. And you're the one that's moving.
I can't hear what you said.
So that's the problem with the not having easements and not having maintenance agreements and all of this on paper, because we don't know if you sewered into them, or you sewered into their sewer, or they sewered into your sewer, or maybe they were built at the same time and just decided to tie into the same sewer. But because property A is meeting the trigger, property A is the one that needs to come into compliance. Property B may not get touched, but property A would need to either separate, well, separate
But
either
if
way.
they're tied into yours,
But how do you that it's
if you
yours?
cut them off, where do they then
You-
go?
you
I
do
You're
mean,
not cutting them off, you're
Okay.
replacing up to the
You're
common
starting
and then
over.
separating.
Oh, I see
And
what you're saying.
they maintain the existing
Yeah.
lateral and
Okay.
you create your separate lateral.
But to your, I think, I'm sure what many people are, the point people are making is, to comply with the ordinance as it's currently written, you need the cooperation of your neighbors. That is it. I mean, you do. Whether, because you're gonna be doing work in the part that goes to their property. I mean, it's almost hard to imagine a situation right now. But people, I wanna not be totally negative on this. We've had a handful of these over the last couple of years that have come along through the ordinance, the permit trigger. And they actually have worked it out. People have said, okay, you do this, we'll separate it out. So it's not unsolvable, though it does present some problems.
Yeah, it's just
Oh, so if there is no easement, then you need a surveyor to do all that, right? To map out an easement, get it recorded. This can be a real problem with lenders, because then you're changing the title report. And it can be a huge problem.
Then the
with
loan?
that. And it takes time, right, to map out an easement. And let's say there's no other way to do it, the neighbor has to grant an easement. Is there gonna be something eminent domain where they have to, something like that?
Well, we won't, the district certainly, and this is still entirely a private property matter, remember. So we are never gonna come in and say, you have to, and dictate what the solution is. We're going to say, this is your lateral, it's on private property. So we're gonna let you, so to speak, figure that out.
So if it's unsolvable, there are two neighbors or three neighbors that don't get along, what's gonna happen in 60 days after the escrow?
Don't take the list of
Okay, so really, at some point down the road, we would notice that there hadn't been enforced, that hadn't been complied. And then we would then at some point, we then go into enforcement steps, which is letters and warnings and so forth. And to be clear, because it's public health and safety with wastewater systems, and you, as you guys know what I said earlier, this isn't something we do lightly ever. At some point, the district has the authority to come in and do the work and assess the properties on their tax rolls. We do have that authority. It's not one I'm aware that we've ever used, and it's not one we'd ever use very lightly. So the hypothetical is if we reviewed, say, our records, and we realized this property never took care of it, first step is gonna be letters and opening up a dialogue and seeing if we can get the problem fixed. And that's about as far as I'd speculate. We've never had to go that, further than that.
I like that solution.
I
It
do
sounds
too.
cheaper and it's spread over years on your property taxes.
Yeah.
And you guys deal with the issue.
Enforcement is a very big, it's a time and money
I think
sink
we're
for
going up to
us.
7% commission
Really try to
in
do
Ross
this.
Valley.
Okay, so let me just,
Yeah.
since Blaine has requested that I
Let's
mention
talk
this
about that.
case study.
Yeah.
I have a very old friend of mine in Sausalito, where it is mandatory, as you know, to scope your line and make repairs
Yeah.
where necessary.
Yeah.
And in advance of selling, and thank God it was 2 years in advance, she knew her father was getting ill and she was going to be selling eventually, and all of a sudden, around that time, they discovered the line was leaking on the lower neighbor's landscape. So as soon as she was notified, she wanted to fix it. She approached the neighbor, hey, we've got a leak and we understand we share this line and we want to get it fixed. He was a litigator who happened to live there, had no interest in having anybody have access to his yard. They ended up in through threats of litigation and then finally an arbitration, they did solve it. It took 2 years and $200,000 in legal fees. Because the neighbor didn't want anybody stepping onto his land. Now, this is a very Sausalito entitlement story.
Yeah.
But it happens.
Yeah.
In high-value neighborhoods, they're very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, we run, our service people run into different, challenges out there.
But what a waste of money.
Yeah, well, that's a worst case scenario, but it is not unforeseeable for, that set of circumstances. One thing, I just want to make sure I cover this, but we can continue answering questions as long as you guys have them. What can you do to assist your clients? These are just suggestions. So first of all, if you have a property that you're starting to work with, call us, email. We have a website. It's not the best. We're trying to get it upgraded, so phone's probably better. But we will share with you whatever information we have on the property. We maintain these lateral cards. We can tell you what we know about previous permits, etc. Everything that's in those handouts over there is all stuff that's on our website, so it's available. We certainly urge folks to get familiar with the basics of the requirements, and also with some of the things like the lateral replacement grant program, so that you can provide hopefully incentive, or not incentivize, but encourage your clients or interested parties to be aware and take advantage of those. The earlier, the better. As you guys know, I mean, we tacked on that 60-day extension for a reason, because we're trying to give as much time as possible. But the earlier, this is for all kinds of reasons, the earlier we start to address a lateral problem that's related to a property transaction, the better in every case. And then staff are available. I mean, we really have tried hard to add resources to be able to support this program. So Danielle and Wendy are two very good contacts for questions on this. Our inspector staff that go out and do the observations on the CCTV, they know a fair amount about this. We're going to continue to do the outreach and get information out there. And yeah, I mean, we're not done.
What if you live in a house that's 50 years old, you know you need a new sewer lateral, and you just say, I want to do it, I want to be part of the grant program, let me just do it.
Yeah.
Call her, and she's going to sign you up for $4,000 in financial assistance to get your loan, to get your lateral.
How successful are people in getting that? I mean, because I've been hearing that you may get it, you may not get it.
The grant?
Yeah.
Danielle, how many have we rejected?
This year, I think we probably rejected less than 10.
The only reason why I'm asking that is
170.
sometimes we're negotiating the cost of this, like, not so much in
Well, that's
Ross
why-
Valley, but we're negotiating that, we're crediting the buyer X amount of dollars.
I mean, that's why it's best to get started in the process as early as possible. The reason why not every lateral qualifies for the grant program is because it's based on a condition assessment. So the grant program, we're giving out free money, and it's not an unlimited resource, so we have to target it towards the worst laterals in the district, the ones that have the most severe impact on the collection system. So the ones that are rejected are the ones that don't reach the threshold that you need to make that qualification. So it's based on, so it may not pass the pressure test, but it may not also qualify for the grant program. So the condition assessment is based on it's a industry standard, NASCO, for sewer condition assessments. I don't know how many times I can say that. Basically, each defect gets a different score depending on how severe it is. So roots, offset joints, cracks, and then you add that up, divide it by the length of the pipe, and there's a number it has to reach.
And how many did you say failed versus how many that passed?
I think that we've approved over 170 this fiscal year, so just since July 1st, and less than 10 have been rejected. So it's a pretty large number being approved. And if we do get the loan program approved, we've lowered the threshold basically to anybody.
The ordinance that's going to go before the board suggests that the qualifications be 1 defect, Pack P defect, or, not and, or fail the pressure test, or has non-conforming material. So the ABS pipes that might look like they're okay, they're not a good material to have here, and they're against code. So we want those replaced. No, it's a very brittle plastic. Clay.
So the access
check
to
with the district engineer.
So the access to the loan program, if it gets approved tomorrow, is meant to be really as generous as reasonably possible. Yeah.
The only thing I would comment on that, if we're going to be discussing it, is to make sure that it isn't something that has to be inherited by the buyer, and they have to also qualify for the loan.
Oh yeah, no, it rides, everything we talk about literally, it usually rides with the property, so to speak. So it's whoever currently is the holder of the title. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
I'm in the process of applying for the grant and replacing a sewer lateral at my house in San Anselmo.
Okay.
Staff is fabulous. I just want to say that, guys, I'm doing it.
Thank you.
What the issue that I've had that's curious to me is that I have had 3 bids now, and my cost is not particularly expensive. My high bid is $6,000, but my low bid is $4,000. And every person has said, well, can you tell me how long the line is, or can you tell me how deep the line is, or I wish there was, I'm talking about the vendors, are saying, wish that there was some guidelines from you that what the initial camera inspection would do, so that everybody would be bidding on
We
the same
literally
thing.
had that discussion yesterday, that if the loan program does get rolled out, that would be a good time for us to go back to the contractors and have another discussion, say, okay, we've got this going on with the loan program, and we've considered having a form, which, you know, says the depth of the main, the depth of the curve, I think the lateral, if there's any sags. Yeah, this is something that we're literally in talks about.
They're totally covering their butts right now, so I'll get half of the lowest bid, but on his bid, it says, because there's no standard guidelines, we won't guarantee that this price, you know, it's just gonna get complicated. And I'm wondering if you're mapping as you're going. That was the other thing, you're not mapping condos, I know. But can you, are you mapping the lateral systems?
Oh, the short answer is we are just getting started on that. That's a whole other discussion. But we're at the tail end of a very extensive mapping and assessment process for the public sewer system. We're basically 95% done. I'm going to use a couple acronyms. Our entire system is mapped in a geographic information system, GIS database. We share that with all kinds of public agencies. The locations of the laterals are mapped as points, but what we have not done, and it's kind of the last step of our mapping, this will take a couple of years, is we would like to actually have information in our system on every single lateral electronically. So things like, you know, the age, the depth, et cetera. And that is what we were talking about earlier, this access database tool contract, development contract that we're about to let. The next step with that is then going to be able to hire some horsepower, basically take 15,000, hate to say it, but it's in 2015, this is the case. We've got 15,000 paper cards down there that we've got to get basically digitized and put into a database. So that's going to be our next step to support that.
But
so,
that doesn't even represent all the laterals. We do not have a card
of
on every
everyone.
lateral
This is
in
true.
the district.
This is true.
Back to the pavement moratorium issue.
Yes.
And specifically Sir Francis Drake and unincorporated Kentfield. I know there was a tremendous amount of work going on in that. How do I find out if that particular area is in a moratorium?
You need to call whoever is the government, like, is it unincorporated?
Yes.
Call Marin County Public Works. There's a fellow named, well, I'll try to, hope I don't put Craig, there's a,
Public Works.
I was gonna say Craig Tackerberry, but who's the roads guy?
I'm going to speak to someone in Barber.
Jukian or something like that?
Well, I'm gonna give you one name I know, it's a guy named Greg Tackerberry, and he's an assistant public works director. There's a person under him who is responsible, you know, basically for the roads program. Someone there should be able to answer that. Tackerberry, yeah, I think it's pronounced Tackerberry. And they should have that. I couldn't tell you.
So I have a plant I know that has a plastic sewer lateral.
Okay.
And so if that withstands the pressure test, is that okay?
Well, there's different types of plastic. So the industry terminology is pretty basic. If it's these are very standard. If it's PVC, what we call PVC C900, et cetera, there's a list of acceptable materials. Those are all good. What we were referring to a moment ago was there was a period of time when a lot of people were putting in this essentially very cheap, brittle, black plastic material. I forget the exact acronym for it. It's the ABS pipe. That's the pipe that's not allowed. And you don't want it. It's just going to fail on you eventually. Yeah.
So recently I had a client replace a rather long, or do some extensive repairs, and I had talked to you about it. It was faster and more efficient for us to just do it rather than ask for the grant, even though it would have qualified, because trying to coordinate, somebody can come out Wednesday at 3 p.m. and I couldn't get any contractors there, and everybody had to be there to have it open, and again for the repair, and again, was not realistic.
Okay.
And so my client just said, the hell with it, I'm writing a check and just
Okay.
doing this. But I think that's going to be a real concern for us. Just when your schedule's available is not necessarily when the contractor is or when we are.
We only need to be out for the first inspection. We don't have to come out for the subsequent estimates that they give.
But you ought to be out there for the repairs.
There's only one
When it was
final,
open.
there's one final inspection that they have to come out for. So there's one in the beginning for the camera
Camera.
inspection, and then one at the end.
But not pressure, just camera.
Well, the pressure test is done at the very end with, it's just it's any other lateral in the district not triggered by the ordinance that is replaced has to do the pressure test anyways. That's just standard in a.
We have tried, I mean, to maintain targets of turnaround times and response times, so we do want to hear things like that.
But we have
I mean,
short inspection periods sometimes, and.
No, I get it, absolutely, I know every sale is different, but so we've basically been trying to say, okay, anything more than about, say, 5 to 10 working days, we're saying is like, okay, we need to find a way to shorten that up. So if you are seeing situations where you've done the right, you filed paperwork and you're like, okay, I need an inspection, and the staff all know this. So if we're seeing problems with response time from the district, we need to hear about that. And we will do our best to put resources in place to reduce those response times, because we don't want that to be the hang-up.
It's especially that initial camera, because we
Yeah.
sometimes we're tying ourselves into 3
Okay.
days of inspections, and 3 days we have to get that camera out
And
there.
the other thing that we're hoping,
I
we,
thought we were told we had to do a pressure test at the beginning and at.
no, you
I
don't.
thought that too.
That was the point of confusion we sort of talked about for a while, or not confusion, it was different understandings. So you do not want to go out right off the bat on an old lateral and say, well, let's do a pressure test and see if it's going to stop. Okay. So we did an amendment to the ordinance just last month that had some clarifying language to that says the district basically recommends that the first thing you do is a voluntary video inspection to assess the condition, because that will tell you most likely whether it has a reasonable chance of
But you want to be at that inspection now? Because we did that all the time without you guys
We-
here, so now
we
you
don't
want to
need
be there.
We don't have to be there for
If you want the
that.
grant,
But if you want to look at the grant program,
But you want the
and most
grant,
people
they
want the
have to be
grant.
there.
Can
We want the grant.
Let me just add the whole thing about coordinating between the district and the contractor. The contractors typically will try to coordinate directly with the district so that you or the homeowner don't have to be that middleman in between, how about this date, how about that date, how about this date? So, and that's typically what they do, and so if you're working with the contractor, feel free to say,
put them in touch.
we want the grant program, so can you coordinate with the district to get somebody out there?
Right, one piece of information I want to know, by the way, is whether there's a clean out already, because sometimes there isn't, and you got to pull a toilet, which means that
Yes.
owner will have to give access.
Yeah, so
We'll be there.
actually that's a good point. I know this is a little bit different topic, but there's one piece of really good advice you can always give your clients. If they don't have a clean out and they don't have a backflow prevention device, even if they don't decide to sell their house, they change their mind, tell them to put a backflow prevention device on. Every couple of months, we deal with an unfortunate situation that it would be prevented by, and they're mandatory, and the people don't, a lot of the older homes don't have them. It's so if like, say there's somehow the sewer inadvertently gets pressurized, it happens. A backflow prevention device is gonna keep that from creating a huge mess inside that person's house. It's a very inexpensive, relatively inexpensive thing to have. Your newer places all have them. If you are on a property and that person does not have a backflow prevention device, just tell them it's worth their money to put it in, because when it goes bad, it goes really bad.
Did it go up to steeply?
Yeah, and we pay. People file damage claims and we try to help them out.
Even a
But
clog in their own lateral can
Will cause
end up
a
backing
problem.
up into their
Yeah.
house, and a backflow prevention device
there's a reason
will
they're
cause it to go
required.
outside instead of
Yeah.
inside.
But you said both things would be good. The clean out is another,
They're both required. They're both,
and a
yeah.
lot of homes don't have.
Well, isn't
Yeah.
it the same thing, the dome things, isn't that?
What we call the top hat or dome thing, I think, that's your backflow prevention device.
Isn't that the clean out too?
Well, the clean out's the actual riser from the pipe.
That has the dome on it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Can
so
I
I guess
make,
they are. Thank you.
before, I know people are kind of moving out, and Andy said that you guys would find this really informational, this is just stats based on the lateral grant program. It breaks it down by city, the average length of pipe, and the average cost of replacement, total cost of replacement. And then it has a pretty little graph for you too. Anyways, it's pocket size, and that way you're out there and you're saying, okay, I've got a client in Kentfield, you know, the average cost right now in Kentfield is about $6,500. And so then you can sort of use that initially to share with your client as you're starting starting to work through information. And then the other thing I wanted to say, I know we talked about the common laterals a lot, and just through the grant program, we've been dealing with them for the last, since 2009, and we've never required or allowed common laterals to be maintained if you go through the grant program. And we've, this Ordinance 66, the remodel started, proportion started in July 1st, so we've been dealing with a lot of these. And I know it sounds and it seems like it's going to be a nightmare, but more often than not, it's not, and we find a way to work through it. So I just, be optimistic and, let us know and let us help you work through things. And a lot of times it really actually works out great, so.
That's a condo remodel too, isn't it?
What?
It's a condo remodel too, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so
75,000.
I know you feel like you're, it's us against you, but really, like, we're all working this together. It's not just realtors, people that are doing remodels have to do with this too.
I would say we don't feel that way. We're just on a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And it's just a bigger workload for
okay,
us.
It appears that you're going to run out of funds, so how often and how much access do you have to additional funds for the grant program?
Well, so the grant program, it's really, it is not unlimited. It's the discretion of the board, and the district does have limited financial resources. This year was, I say, unusual. It was certainly a precedent-setting year for us to have, I could think of, say, 150,000. I think in the future we can't expect that number. It's just too much for us. We kind of tried to make it generous this year to really push, knowing that we had the lateral ordinance coming out. The loan program, I think we're gonna, if it's approved by the board, I'm very confident we're gonna find a way to make that sustainable. And this is a little bit out there, but I'm talking to our board about it. We'd like to explore some, this is looking down the road maybe a year, so I know it's a little bit further out there. Some of the grant opportunities, in other words, we go get a grant from the state of California, for example, under, and this is a little bit of inside baseball stuff, but what's called the Prop 1A funding rounds that are coming up. That's, if you guys all, if any of you vote in this room, last election you voted on a thing called Proposition 1A. It set up like $7 billion in different funding around the state for water projects, and all this. Big chunks of that money are flowing to all different parts of the state for different things. Lateral replacement is starting to represent a really significant community-wide capital investment. Think about it. If I took 1,000 laterals a year in all of Marin County, times $6,000 a lateral, or $7,000 a lateral, you're looking at anywhere from $5 to $10 million a year in the community's resources on a widespread basis going into upgrading these things over the years. It's worth, I think it's worth asking the question, at least from a public policy perspective, do we want to go get some assistance in doing that, through the state legislature, through some of the state grant programs. Now that's not uncommon for, for utility industry needs. So that's something that's very much in the early stages. But to come back to your question, we have 2 or 3 options we're looking at for longer term funding on the grants, but nothing's guaranteed on the grants. When the money's gone, the money's gone.
Have you gotten any wind, from other like San Rafael or Nevada, that once you really get going and everybody else is going to follow suit? Those two, mainly those 2 cities, San Rafael and Nevada.
Right. I don't know what their plans are. I mean, again, most of you probably, well, some of you probably do. We follow the action of SASM a fair amount because that cluster of agencies is Mill Valley and Homestead and that area.
And that stands for what?
Sewer Agency of Southern Marin. It's the group that covers, again, it's Mill Valley and some of the unincorporated stuff. Richardson Bay, yeah, is in there. And then Sausalito, Marin City, one of you mentioned Sausalito, Marin City. They're the last agency down. They're the ones that handle half of TAM CSD, Marin City, and City of Sausalito on that agency. All of them have something on the books. I guess not to make too big of a plug, in a sense, but you guys represent a very, big industry in the county. And as a general manager, what's really become clear to me as we've looked at this over the last 6 or 8 months is these are really large numbers on a community-wide basis. That is, it's a reinvestment in upgrading a basic public service, which is safe, reliable wastewater service. When you're looking at a community, say Marin County, having to invest, 5, 6, pick your number, $10 million a year, that's real, those are substantial resources. I think so our policymakers, our electeds, and I do say this to my board, so I'm not going out on a limb here, we need to start thinking about exploring how to be going to our representatives at the state and other levels and say, look, this is a big problem. And you've just authorized $7 billion in statewide funding for all types of water and wastewater projects over the next 5 to 10 years. Where in this is something that helps solve this very basic issue that is affecting communities all up and down, it's not just the Bay Area either. San Francisco, okay, just quick insight. City of San Francisco is launching, they are in the middle of launching a $5 billion billion wastewater rehab program for their collection system. That's what the city of San Francisco is undertaking. And that's not the treatment plant that you sometimes hear about. If you go drive around the city of San Francisco these days, you'll see all the stacks of clay pipe and all the streets that are dug up.
Clay? They're using clay?
That's not that's their decision. You're looking at the beginnings of a $5 billion investment by the city of San Francisco in their collection system. This is what we're all dealing with. I mean, it's
aging infrastructure.
Yeah.
Aging infrastructure. So
anyway.
to Mark Levin.
There you
Tell
go.
him to take
That's
it
what I
on
was
the
trying
top.
to say.
So it's 10 to 20 years to repair 200 miles, but how many trunk lines do you have, the actual ones that are the center where it comes to, and how long does it take, for example, the one in Larkspur, what's the progress and timeline?
The public ones, the public sewers? Well, we're not aiming to replace every mile of 200 miles of pipe, we're taking it like in 5-year increments.
You're just doing the trunk lines?
Yeah, basically the large stuff. Well, not I didn't say that correctly. We're dealing with all of the public sewers, some trunk lines, like this one, Magnolia's right up here, and all of the smaller, 6-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch lines. If you know the history of the area, way back in like the 50s or 40s or something, there was a big main trunk line run all the way down from Fairfax area to where the old wastewater treatment plant used to be.
Right.
We just actually in the last couple of months finished what we call a condition assessment of the 9 miles of old trunk line. Some of the stuff runs like right under downtown San Anselmo, et cetera. I have a report on my desk as of last week that shows the findings and it's going to make recommendations for upgrades. That's going to be a whole different set of projects. It's 8 to 9 miles of the highest risk, oldest, largest pipe in the system. So that's going to be its own
So
thing.
how do you, the trunk line that you're working on now in Larkspur, do you have a timeline for that?
Oh, we're going to be done out there by April, yeah.
Oh,
This one up here right around the corner is going to be done.
And then do you do like a flushing of that to test it also?
Oh, yeah, everything they do gets tested.
And I understand there's a noise associated with that.
I don't know. When they release the air, there may be, I don't know. Yeah.
Can I just, before we lose any more people?
Yeah, please.
I'd like to show you, this is our website, rvsd.org. There is hopefully.
I saw that, that's what prompted me.
Okay. Whoops.
You have a little
This mouse
button
here.
highlighted,
There
so
we
we can
go.
click on it, huh?
So this box is on our homepage, and so there's a section on the private sewer lateral ordinance. And when you click on that, it opens basically a series of screens that the printouts are what were the handouts here. So this is not going to answer all of the nuances for the condos, common laterals, difficult situations, but this is a good place to get information or to direct your clients to sort of open the subject with them.
All of your pretty what I call your standard situations, this is more than enough to get you started. It should be, it's got resources, who to talk to, the basic process. Again, carving out the difficult ones of the common laterals and the condos. For most of your single family or just single user properties, whatever, I think you'll find most of what you need here to get things going. And then if you're ever in doubt or you ever don't know what to do next, you call Danielle.
Well, and it also has some useful documents and information on it. It has a lot of the building department contacts for the different cities in the county. Community development, I believe, is for the county. It has some tips and links to the contractor licensing board. So if you want to check out the contractors or your client wants to check a map. It has some guidelines for the contractors, and it takes the ordinance and all of the little amendments that we did, which I think total 3 right now, and just consolidates the text so you're not having to bounce from one to another.
Great.
So
Is there a list of approved plumbers on there?
There's some information, let's see, down here, RVSD's lateral replacement grant program, which, this mouse is not working very well. But there's a link to that, which will open up the guide that has the list of plumbers for the program. We don't endorse plumbers per se, these are just folks who have agreed to work within the program guidelines.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you very much.
yeah.
Thank you.
that's 5 o'clock.